people are really using music as like a tool in their life. So in some ways, it's becoming more than what it maybe was before. That's why I also want to see that it's not like only competing with other styles of music. It's also kind of adding to people's lifestyle. They might still listen to a lot of the artist-centric music that they've been used to listening to, but this is like a new component filling like a new need.
This podcast is produced by Amplitude Ventures, your partner in early stage startups.
Today's guest, Niklas Brantberg, takes us inside the world of mood music, the soundtracks to our everyday lives. We dig into the balance between creativity and technology, the rise of anonymous success, and why human emotion still drives music forward. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sound Connections podcast. Today, I have the honor to have Niklas Brantberg in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you. I like the pronunciation.
Yeah, was it totally correct, or yeah?
Yeah, that was pretty good. It's pretty good.
It's I'm Danish, live in Norway. It's a Swedish name. Like it's actually Restrom is Swedish as a name actually. But Niklas, you're here because you are running something incredibly interesting. So Overtone Studios, Mood Music, a company that belongs to Epidemic Sound, and it's a really interesting topic that I'm looking so much forward to dissecting today. But Niklas, for the people who don't know you, who are you and what do you do?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. Niklas Brantberg is my name. I run a mood music record label called Overtone Studios. I would say it's one of the biggest mood music record labels in the world. We're part of Epidemic Sound, and I also have a background of more than a decade within Epidemic Sound as well. And then I'm also a failed musician, as we discussed earlier. So that's my biggest hobby. But at work, I'm more of a business guy, and then at home, I'm a kind of amateur music guy.
Amazing. So one of the things that's going to be really interesting about this call is Epidemic Sound, Overtone Studios, that the whole ecosystem has, from the music industry, been under a lot of controversy the next many years. Merited or non-merited, we'll sort of cover today. But me as an observer that's sort of been studying music industry, have always been very fascinated with that work because it has been incredibly disruptive to how you think about music streaming, music consumption. And that for me is really interesting because it is one of the players, like Spotify, that has basically changed a lot of things about how music economy works and how you approach it. So I'm happy to dissect your work and sort of the past decade of work in this space and try to understand that a lot better. And I'll try to take it from angles of both, like, okay, what do you think about this that people say? Or me, myself, being, in full honesty, I'm a big fan of what's happening at Epidemic Sound because I really love the way of looking at music in a different way. But we'll go into that. Overtone Studios, that you're the CEO of, that has had a path of its own besides Epidemic Sound. Maybe you can walk us through that journey and also when you took over CEO, like what was happening with Overtone Studios?
Yeah, sure. So Overtone was founded around 8 years ago by a guy called Alex Papakonstantino, one of the longest last names I've ever heard. A half Greek guy who's had a long history of music production, working for J-Lo, Mark Anthony, a lot of people in like the Latin pop field. So he founded the company 8 years ago, and that was when kind of mood music was just starting to brew a little bit on these streaming platforms, and he was quite early in on that, and brought in his network, and they started doing music, and they saw it grew a lot. So it really grew organically in the first couple of years. As he built that company, that got bigger, lot streams, a lot more music creators. And then a couple of years into that journey, then Epidemic Sound got involved and acquired the company. And Alex is still the head of the music and the artist roster at Overtone Studios. But when we then made that acquisition, I was part of Epidemic Sound, and then a couple of years later, I took the step over to head up the Overtone team as well. But in short, because not everyone knows what we talk about when we say mood music, but it's quite a broad term. So it's typically instrumental music. It's genre-wise, it could be anywhere from like ambient, classical, jazz, lo-fi, lounge, deep house, etc. But the main purpose is to kind of soundtrack a mood, soundtrack a mode, certain type of moment, soundtrack activities. And that's really like, that's where we're experts. And so we have hundreds of music creators, and we kind of collaborate with them to create music. And then our role is to put that music out into the world and get it heard as much as possible, so that we can, make sure that our music creators can make a living doing this music. So we have a 50-50 royalty model where we pay out 50% to music creators, and it's been a successful model so far.
Interesting. Like when operating music, and you would know this more than most, there's always this difficult dynamic between sentiment and actualities. And I think one of the biggest sentiment oppositions to music that I've met, especially when it's sort of reached an incredible scale, has been sort of the faceless artists. Because the whole underlying concept about music is that it's anonymous to some degree. What have you experienced of like sentiment opposition to the expansion of music? What have you experienced?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question, and I think some of it is almost like legacy, because a lot of people, a lot of music creators that got into making mood music were kind of the personality almost, that they thought, how nice to be able to focus on the music and not focus as much as you need to do on, building your own social media and personal branding and being out there doing interviews and things like that. So I think a lot of the people that got attracted to making mood music were kind of those that kind of personality, that they felt like, I really want to focus on the craft and the sonics of it. So there's one angle there, and I think that's and then the second angle is partly that I think the interest, at least initially, the interest in the artist profile, so to speak, is typically less than it is the interest in like a pop or rock or R&B type of artist. So those two combined has kind of led to, it's kind of became a bit faceless, a bit anonymous. With that said, I think the trend is definitely shifting, and both the listeners want to understand more about the human behind the music and the kind of the stories behind it. So as it has grown now, people are saying, okay, well, what else is there apart from the music? And people are getting more interested. And I think the artists are also seeing that, you can actually build quite a big audience within these fields. It's not only like people stream it on a playlist and then they never want to, or they don't have any interest in the actual tracks further than the playlist. But I think more and more people are starting to save those tracks that they like to their own playlist and start following them. So I think it's the kind of trend is more going into the direction of artists wanting to showcase themselves more, and we definitely kind of promote that and talk to artists and say, like, you should spend a bit more time on the profiling and the story as well. And I think the listeners want to hear more.
I definitely also myself sort of observe that sentiment that they're becoming more personas. But I think one of the negative parts of this discussion has been arguably that mood music or functional music has been the winners of the pro rata distribution model, like where payment of streams is distributed to amount of consumption, and not necessarily to the deliberate amount of listening from one user to an artist. And I think that's one of the things that have maybe made this extra controversial, that there's a lot of high volume consumption of music that is then distributed because of pro rata model in favor of these mass consumption functional music. What have you sort of seen in that discussion, and what's sort of your perspective?
Yeah, well, it's always tricky discussing all the different kind of distribution mechanisms because there's quite many different routes to take, and there's been a lot of talk about the I can't remember what they call it, the SoundCloud model now, where they more distribute a kind of a person's
I think they call it
individual.
artist-centric model, but yeah, something like that, yeah.
Exactly. So I think there's definitely different routes you can take there. But I think one thing to keep in mind is that the kind of the listening behaviors have changed a lot. And before it was very, you went to the shop to buy a CD or to buy a vinyl record, and then it's very the intent is very clear. Nowadays, people actually don't always want to do that. They want to go to a theme or a category of music and get served something different. And if that's like, is that better or worse, or should that be valued more or less? I think that's almost like a philosophical discussion in a sense.
It entirely is that, and that's the big
Yeah,
issue in this.
yeah, exactly. But I think the growth of kind of this type of music, I think it comes from this like abundance of choice. So people don't always know exactly what they do want to. They get bombarded with content, and they don't know exactly what they want at any given time. So then it's much more it's easier to kind of get direction and support in what you want to listen to. And kind of I'm a little bit like that myself. Like I'm a music nerd. I have a long list of tracks and artists that I want to check out, the new releases that I really want to listen to. But then a lot of times when I go to my app, it's like, man, I'm just gonna put on something that's kind of serves my mood. So I think the way, like the behavior of how you interact with music has changed, and then I think it also makes sense to, that the model of remuneration also kind of reflects that in some way.
Because it does have a lot of value. Personally in my life, I have ADHD, and I recently sort of started medicine less than 2 years ago, and really the only solve for me without medicine has been the playlist Peaceful Piano that I'm sure that Overtone Studio have had a lot of placements in. Because for me, that was my wait or sort of waiting in something like that I could actually focus. And even
Uh-huh.
today, I've been lucky to have medicine. It really works for me, but I run a lot, as we talked before
Uh-huh.
this interview, and really the only way I can calm my mind is with that playlist. Like, it's
Uh-huh.
because my mind races when it has space to do so, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The problem is it always races towards work. So the
Uh-huh.
only way for
Uh-huh.
me to actually have a run where I can just be present in the moment and think about running
Uh-huh.
is with, like, functional music. Like, it's the
Yeah.
only solution I have. So I think there's also a lot of value to it. It sort of gets also lost in that discussion to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole um, more of a macro trend of like people's awareness of well-being, wellness, and health, that obviously increased a lot in the last decade or two, and people focusing more on sleep quality and their sort of focus, as you talked about, and meditation and yoga and things like that. So people are really using music as like a tool in their life. So in some ways it's becoming more than what it maybe was before.
Yep.
So I think it's definitely adding, and that's why I also want to see that it's not like only competing with other styles of music. It's also kind of adding to people's lifestyle. They might still listen to, a lot of the kind of artist-centric music that they've been used to listening to, but this is like a new component filling like a new need. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah.
So, I'm really curious about sort of your path into this. When I've sort of looked through your LinkedIn, it looks like your early days was somewhat related to music while you were studying, went into consulting, then into epidemic. But can you sort of tell me, how did you come into this world? What was the entry?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, always love music. I used to play in a bunch of bands and stuff in university. Always got paid in cash and beer, but never did anything serious with it, and never like recorded and released stuff. But I studied business. I worked for an early music startup actually when I was studying, and we were just 3 people, and we got our hands on the Spotify beta product before it was released, and then we saw that and we're like, okay, well, we're screwed. so we dropped that venture quite early on, and then I kind of followed the herd from business school to a management consultancy firm, where I worked in a ton of interesting industries, but you did 6 weeks here, 8 weeks there. It was jumping around, learned a lot, but I didn't really see that as like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I wanted to move partly closer to music, but also wanted to move to a place where I could kind of be part of a journey and kind of build something, which that intrigued me. So I actually sent a cold email to the Epidemic Sound CEO, Oscar Höglund. He actually, I read an article, and he also had a background, same business school and same consultancy firm. So I was like, this is meant to be. So I sent an email, and we had lunch, and ended up joining Epidemic Sound quite early on, when they were around 10 people or so. So they just kind of got started. Had the first couple of big clients, but still very early on. I spent 4 or 5 years, on the commercial side of Epidemic Sound, kind of helping them build up sales teams, and build up partnerships around the world, and kind of open up offices in Europe and in the US, so that we can kind of bring the Epidemic Sound product out to clients, which was like production companies and broadcasters and brands and things like that. And then after 4 or 5 years, I got the chance to move over from the commercial side over to the music side. So then I spent around 4 or 5 years again on the as chief of music at Epidemic, being responsible for the whole artist roster, and signing new artists, and working with the artists to create music for the Epidemic Sound catalog, and also kind of distributing and marketing that music, partly to listeners, but mainly to video creators, which is the kind of the clients of Epidemic Sound.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, especially that effort towards sort of video and the synchronization world has been quite disruptive, because traditionally speaking, the primary motive of synchronization was that it was existing songs out, and you would buy those songs, or you would custom make it for a project. Epidemic Sound came in and basically created like its whole universe of low barrier of entry and low cost ways of getting high quality music, which really the first perception I have Epidemic Sound and its sort of disruption into that was that like basically not crushing the market of that, but they're definitely changing how people need to think about the unique economics of producing music in that field. Can you walk me through what happened at that point and sort of what was going on?
Yeah, so the kind of the foundation of it is coming from the founders of Epidemic. So one group was Oscar, that I just mentioned, the CEO, and he was coming from the TV production industry, and working with broadcasters, and he felt like dealing with music was kind of like a low point of those projects. It's like, it's so cumbersome with the music, both rights and finding the right stuff, and he was like, it shouldn't be like that. Music should be the most fun part of the project, but it was kind of the opposite. So they was feeling that problem, and then he got together with a couple people from the music side of things that were seeing another problem, which was that there's so many talented music producers that just couldn't really make a living in music. So they were trying to figure out a way of kind of solving these two problems kind of at once, and then they came up with the kind of Epidemic Sound model. Which is, in short, is that they pay up front for the music, acquire the full rights of the music, and it's outside of the collecting society world. So Epidemic Sound will be the only stakeholder kind of that has any right to the music. So they pay up front to the music creator. They get more of a predictable type of lifestyle and predictable income. And Epidemic Sound is then the only stakeholder that licenses music to the users, so they can be very flexible in terms of giving kind of global rights, all platforms, and just making sure that there's no problems with the music on that end. So the kind of the idea came more from solving that issue. But once they started building that catalog for it, they saw that, as you mentioned, there's a lot of value in actually listening to the users and the clients, and understanding, well, what do they need from the music and what do they need from a catalog. So I think a lot of the value nowadays is kind of not only in the kind of the rights model. A lot of it is like in having a tailored catalog of music for your video productions, and that's partly then the what styles of music, how is the music, and not only kind of genre-wise, but also like the dynamics of the music. Is the music is there lots of happening in the music that you can use in your productions to create emotion and to enhance the emotion. And also making sure the music is discoverable, so that you can find what you need, because that's a huge problem. Epidemic Sound's catalog is 50,000 tracks. A lot of the other production music libraries have hundreds of thousands of tracks. So it's really like trying to find a needle in a haystack when what you're looking for. So you need to have proper metadata and the proper technology to assist the users, so they can find what they need.
I think one really interesting thing about this talk is, growing up in Denmark and music industry and being somewhat connected to Norwegian music industry as well. Like if you would say, talk about a business model where a company would operate outside of collection society, that would be blasphemy. Because that is the sentiment in many countries. But we had a pre-talk about this where I think it's incredibly interesting to talk about Sweden, culturally speaking, because Sweden, at least in my perception, has a different cultural association to music when it comes to its value or capitalism or commercialization, where as I see it, Sweden has a more like this is an industry, like this is a commercial powerhouse. At least it's become that, more so than other territories. And Swedes, when I work with Swedes, act differently when it comes to around music, and maybe a tiny bit more disregard of like the cultural norms of how to think about music. What's your take on this? Like, how do you read that situation?
That was an interesting take that I haven't thought that much about in the past. First of all, I do want to say something about the whole kind of blasphemy of working in this way.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think it's often gets lost is that people, when talk about Epidemic Sounds, like, oh, they buy the rights, so the creators don't see any upside. So I want to be clear with that we Epidemic Sound buys the rights to the music, but they also pay 50% royalties on any streaming revenues, and they have a soundtrack bonus, which is very similar to a royalty in the music industry, because if the music gets used a lot by users, they get additional payments. So they really have a very artist-friendly model, but it's just it's outside of the system, so they can be flexible and in many ways better than the regular system. But with that said, just that's something like I feel passionate about.
Filled out for a fact, but that's like it does get lost in translation when there's these coverages. Like, and the music industry is not always the most nuanced, and people seem to get quite heated about stuff.
Yeah.
So yes, even though
exactly.
that's true, just because you do something different where it's easy to perceive it as something different, like that's the angle that most people take. But I totally agree.
But other than that, or it's kind of moving to the bulk of your question, it's I think it's this kind of combination of obviously the kind of the Swedish music wonder of a lot of like bands and artists and producers becoming really successful during like 70s, 80s, 90s. So a lot of people kind of saw success in the music industry, like I would say both cultural and commercial. I think that was a big part of the kind of then like music tech companies that were kind of founded in Sweden, like Spotify, SoundCloud, Epidemic Sound, and others as well. So I think people were seeing this, that it's possible to have to combine both cultural and commercial success, and I think having role models like in whatever you do yourself, but also in kind of the business world, I think that's super important. So I think that kind of probably plays a big part of it.
Mm. Yeah, and what not everyone might know is like Sweden, just in traditional music, is one of the largest music exporters in the world. I think they're number 4 or something like that. But per capita, like it's by far the most successful music country in the world by far. So there is a totally different economy around music when it comes to success. Like one of the things is Scandinavian, where I see a clear difference, because we live in this very socialist, democratic countries, is oftentimes with art, there's a lot of public funding. There's a lot of like
Mhm.
stipends and assist development. But in Sweden, very differently from Denmark and Norway, there's a lot of like professional songwriter schools. There's a lot of professional artist schools, and the stipends are not really easy to get. It's not like a subsidized industry to some degree. Like this is an actual commercial career. There's a lot of competition to get into. Isn't that true? Like that's how Sweden does it?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I'm not so much into like the stipend world, but obviously there's yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe that's right. But I know there's. I mean, when there's talk about Swedish music wonder, a lot of it kind of gets credited to like having the municipalities had really like strong music education for children, long time ago, which is still true. But I think that kind of definitely fueled something. And that probably helped a lot with like the early success. But then I think that early success really fueled a lot of the later. It started with like ABBA and the Roxette and everything, and then the whole Max Martin and the Cheiron Studios, that whole network. And I think not only like the early success, but also like those people succeeding then had like a network approach to it, where it was like, it wasn't only Dennis Pop and only Max Martin that were kind of benefiting from their success. They brought in a lot of other producers, and they brought in interns who can kind of work in the studio, and then that intern, got a Billboard #1, 10 years later, and things like that. So there's a lot of like that kind of network approach to it, which I think was very, very important. Yeah, and then I think the view now is that a music business that's like a viable career, either as a creator, because there's a lot of people making a living in music, or such as me being a failed creator, but I can still kind of work quite close to my passion. And there's a lot of there's some bigger music tech companies in Sweden, as the ones I mentioned, but there's a lot of startups as well, trying things out. And a lot of them fail, but some succeed, and I think there's a good community around it. Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, if what I think is really interesting, there's like 2 things I find is really interesting beyond what we just talked about, is, at least as an outsider, I perceive there's like a professional music mafia style in Sweden. Like one of our owners in my company, Empty Ventures, is also a Swedish tech founder, and we sort of talk quite often. And he doesn't talk much about his journey per se, but like when I've sort of figured out who has invested in his company, from like, what, who, like these guys, like, and it's like the network of these sort of musicians, producers, investors, tech guys seems to be like, we call it closely knit, but there's a fairly good sort of overlay between these, where I work a lot with Music Tech Europe, and there's a big disconnect between the music industry and the tech industry and investors. Like in Sweden, it seems, because there has been this continuous success in the whole ecosystem through like 40, 50 years, there is a better connectivity between those layers. Does that make sense? That's how I see it as an outsider.
No, I think that makes sense, and I mean, I think the whole Spotify story is a good testament to it.
Yeah.
Where they saw these problems in the music industry, and then they paired that with just a great network of really tech savvy people, and there's a lot of engineers in Sweden as well, and a lot of technically skilled people as well. So kind of combining these two worlds, that's what really kind of created, or a part of what created kind of Spotify's success.
Mm. Yeah,
I
and
mean, I haven't. I mean, being within the Swedish community, I don't reflect that much about
no,
how
makes
it is
sense.
in other markets. But it's definitely. We were actually at Epidemic Sound. There's a long discussion in the early days, like, are we a music company or are we a tech company? Which was
Yeah.
one of those like lunch discussions, and it kind of also framed a lot of how we were thinking about it. But obviously we're both, and I think that's important to recognize,
Yeah.
because just being really strong on the music side and not leveraging the technology advancements when it comes to, as I mentioned, like music discovery and things like that,
Sure.
which is so important. I think Sound wouldn't have succeeded unless they had that technological side and paired with it, and similar for Spotify.
There was this very interesting case in the media last year, when it comes to sort of financial success of mood music and creators and composers, where some of the top copyright earners in the world was anonymous Swedish mood music composers. So like there was, to your point with Epidemic Sound and sort of splits on royalty and streaming and such, it's really interesting to have the discussion last couple of years, like, okay, besides the sort of controversy or made up controversy, call it what you want, there is composers and artists that is Faceless in a different way that is making a significant living on this music. Like, if a composer does well in mood music, how would you compare that to? Like, what is the financial reality of a successful composer in this space?
Well, I think music industry is interesting in that sense because like the success metrics can be so different. Is it a lot of times people say like, well, how many people are coming to your gigs? Maybe that could be one big success factor. Or like how much coverage are you getting in the media is also like a traditional success factor. And for mood music, that doesn't really make sense. So for us, it's more driven by kind of how many people are actually hearing your music, and that's partly then streams on the streaming platforms, but also could be mood music is not only kind of playlists on stream platforms. It's also like background music in physical environments, or it's being part of fitness apps, when you're doing yoga or meditation or doing workout and things like that. So the success metric there is a little bit more connected to how many times the music gets heard, and if things work well, then that also has a direct correlation with how well they could make a living. But I think, I mean, thinking about Epidemic Sound numbers, I know we were saying that they might be slightly updated now, but I think it's north or between $60,000 and $70,000 a year is the average income for Epidemic Sound music creator, and some of them earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and it's quite we're kind of it's quite similar for Overtone Studios as well. So like it's definitely a lot higher kind of earnings potential, comparing to kind of music industry as a whole. So I think like only looking at the traditional metrics of how you're successful in the music industry, I think that's not really enough. If you're an aspiring musician, you should also think about these adjacent industries like mood music, music for sync, and things like that, because there's definitely there's a lot of revenue in those segments of the market. And if you want to make a living in music, I think it's good to kind of consider all your different options.
Yeah.
But then again, you also need to pair it with what you're good at. We see a lot of time people who want to get into mood music or sync music as, oh, I see there's a lot of money in it, I want to get into it. But that seldom works because the ones who are successful are the ones who are very passionate about this type of music and are like nerding out, and those are the ones who are successful in doing it, rather than the ones who might produce pop music and then say, oh well, I want to make an extra income, I go to this field and do that with my left hand behind my back, but it's usually the ones who are very passionate about it that do succeed. But there's definitely a lot of potential in making a living in music within both sync and mood music, and I think that's very exciting. And we had this kind of after work event a couple of weeks ago. We invited all our music creators to a studio here in Stockholm, and it's just very inspiring to hear these stories about music creators saying, now I can finally quit my day job and focus on music. And I've been in the industry for 10 or 20 years, and I've always had to have a day job, and then I do music at night or in the weekends. But now I can do music all day long, and that's super inspiring for us to hear, and that's kind of one of the purposes of why why these companies were founded.
And one of the interesting things about the model in general, which is besides just a normal day job, is this sort of element of recurring revenue. Obviously, you need to stay relevant and keep on composing, but it's not just like you produce one, you get one. Like it can have a snowball effect, but it could also take some time to build up a catalog that actually makes you money. One thing that I'm getting tired of asking in general, but stays even more relevant for Overtone Studios, is the question of AI.
Mhm.
Like, as AI is becoming better and better, like, even just 2 days ago, I was with my son playing with the new version 5 from Suno, and it's getting so good that, like, what's going to be the future of quality and creation is the big question. And, what a lot of people have been pointing to for a couple of years, which I haven't really seen in practice yet, is the functional type of music, the mute music, and how that's going to be completely exchanged by AI. But I haven't
Mhm.
seen the signs of that yet, at least from an academic perspective. Like, what is your perception of AI music and how it's going to disrupt the financial potential of mute music?
Yeah. I mean, it's I agree. It's a question that you're kind of tired of it because it's the constant discussion, but it's obviously very relevant to discuss. I mean, we see AI as or our vision for what AI could be in the music industry is that it should be a tool and not something to replace human creators. If used in the right way, I think it could be a very powerful tool for a human creator to get better at doing their craft. When talking about a tool like Suno, for example, I think that can be used in a way which I think is super uninspiring, where you write the prompt and click generate and you're done. But I think it can be used in a quite interesting way, where you can test, or you can use it in so many different ways. You can test out ideas. You can come in with a very early demo of something and see, like, how would this sound if I do it like this? Okay, and then that creates more ideas, and then you go back into your studio environment and do something different. Or you can obviously play around with it and create things that can be novel as well, and you can use that novel sound to create something new. So there's definitely, and in the same way, you can become more efficient in producing music, in the same way as, like, all the like new DAWs and the new plugins that are coming that are making it easier to tune vocals or whatever. There's
Yeah.
a lot of this, is a
But
lot of parallel there. So yeah.
let's imagine for a second that we're sort of 2 years from now, because obviously there's a lot of legal safeguards right now. Like it's,
Mhm.
practically speaking, it's really difficult to generate a track on Suno and upload it to Spotify or, whatever, because there's a lot of protective methods. There's like sort of like almost like watermarking in audio that distribution companies sort of detect. So right now it's difficult to have AI come into market and have a fully commercial function. There's a lot of boundaries. But,
Hmm.
right now with, a lot of legal lawsuits and changes in markets and settlements, these sort of legal boundaries might change slowly. Uh,
Yep.
and, assuming theoretically that music created by AI can have similar quality of like human created music, what do you think is going to happen to that sort of macro level financial environment?
Yeah. Well, $1 million question, obviously, and tough to answer. But I think, assuming that what you mentioned, and I think that's quite big assumptions also, because obviously, we're kind of, we're strong believers in that. If you're building AI tech, you need to make sure to license training material, and you need to like remunerate artists fairly, and things like that. So we're strong believers in all those things, and hope that kind of, regulation and all the businesses doing it will kind of, um, will function in that way in the future. So given that, I still believe that, kind of the human artistry will be, noticeable, within the music, and I still believe that there will be a value of having, kind of the human element as part of the music, and I think also that's necessary, for it to not become just like a circular reference of saying, okay, well, this is the peaceful piano sound. We're just going to do a peaceful piano sound over and over again. And you have been a fan of peaceful piano, for a long time. That sound, to like, if you listen to it, very casually, you probably won't notice a huge difference now compared to 5 years ago. But if you listen to it a lot, that sound has actually changed quite a lot. There's different sonical elements, and different, kind of melodic changes as well. And I think that kind of trends in music, I think, will be driven by, taste, and driven by kind of, curation and taste. And I don't think that kind of, moving to a full AI world will kind of, solve that. So I think, AI can be good at, yeah, almost like copying things. But I think if we want to have some kind of a forward movement in things, and then kind of see trends, and I think humans always want that. They don't want the exact same thing all the time. I think that the human element will be key. Um,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting, and I definitely see it from an argument of a forward-leaning company like yourself, like Overtone Studios, where you sort of creating trends and sort of not lacking behind. But there's a big part of the music industry that might not be you guys that are basically copying music, which is still creative-led to some degree, where I don't think the same argument would stand. And then obviously there's the catalog, right? Because everything you do is not just new movements. It's a rich back catalog that also serves its own right and purpose that
Mhm.
very much could be copied. So I think that's the interesting thing, and obviously it's something to be discovered. But one thing that I really reflect on a lot, we have an interview with a professor that's sort of been working in the intersection between music and neuroscience, and it's called Tom Fritz. So everyone can go check that out, that episode. But we discuss basically the three elements of music consumption, and I might be butchering a lot of the interview right here, but what he said was basically that there's a cultural element to music. There's a association to music, and then there's the acoustical part of music. So basically,
Mhm.
acoustical part, in theory, and probably also in practice already now, if you ask me, in many regards, can be completely exchanged by AI. Like there's music is in the digital world is waves, it's zeros and ones, like that could be copied. Then there's the communal thing, like do we have a communal experience of music together? And then there's the association to the brand. But
Mhm.
music um, is not very strong on both the communal and the brand association. It is, primarily of acoustic value. So at least if you listen to Tom Fritz and his research, he argues that at least from an acoustic perspective and a practical understanding of that, AI could most definitely, according to research, take the place of music without a face.
Yeah.
But again, it's a long discussion, but it's
Yeah.
also very unknown.
I mean, I agree on that aspect, that, yeah, obviously being a more, the brand having a lower value than other types of music brings it kind of more, at risk in that sense.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, I think also the music industry is moving to a place where the kind of human behind the creations is becoming more interesting to people. And I think kind of
Is that deliberate, by the way? Like, reference into what we're talking about right now, is that a deliberate strategy, for example, from Overtone Studios to put a face behind your music?
uh, I, I think it's probably a little bit of both. Like I think also from like the listener's end, it becomes more important from a listener's perspective, that because obviously the sentiment from the listeners is a lot of the times, that they want it to be a human made track.
Yeah.
And then given that, obviously both creators and the labels like us feel like, okay, well then it makes sense for us to be clear that it is, if that's the case. So partly that, and then I think, and this I might be proven wrong by some experts here, but as like I think the acoustical elements can also be kind of understated. Like the complexity of mood music is often understated when you talk about acoustically. So there's like this notion of like, oh well, mood music that's easy to make. Put a pad and an easy piano melody and then you're done. But like the subtleties are, there's so many subtleties within music and sonically, and to be honest, like myself, as like a hobby producer, obviously I've even dabbled around with these tools as well. And I find it much easier to make like a passable pop song than to make like a passable peaceful piano track, to be honest. But obviously, I might be a bit biased there in that opinion.
Yeah,
So
there's definitely a discussion that, me being a music producer and audio engineer myself, like I have the capability of distinguishing, making a distinct difference between like different types of music. But for example, my reality, again, pointing back to sort of how I use music, is running, and because it just has a good fit, I have this like headphones that I got with my watch that is like
Mhm.
decent, and I'm not listening it in any environment that would help me differentiate that sort of nuance.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
maybe 90% of the people consuming music would have like similar-ish scenarios. But it's
Yeah.
it's so interesting to sort of discuss. But now, when we are on the topic, what is the future for you guys? You as a CEO, where do you want to take Overtone Studios in regard to, let's call it the threat of AI, or or just in general, where you want to be progressive a music company and still become relevant? Like, where are you going?
I would say that there's a couple of different directions or like dimensions you could say that we're working on. I think one would be geographical.
Yeah.
So mood music today is quite like Western sounding. It's because
Yeah, sure.
it's very like European, American. That's the bulk of our creators coming from it, and that's where the listening is the biggest of these styles of music. But we're seeing a lot of like mood music that's influenced by kind of local music styles in different regions. A lot coming from Asia and South America and also Africa, Middle East, things like that. And I think that's just in its very early stages. And I think it's partly bringing kind of global or like or it's like regional influences to mood music, and having that, I think that becomes interesting music to listen to for anyone, regardless of where they are. Also, the people in kind of the Western regions of the world, but then also kind of bringing mood music to platforms that are bigger in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, when we're discussing with platforms or streaming platforms in Asia, for them, mood music is not yet like a big topic. They're like, we don't see, we don't have that much playlists in these types of styles or genres. We're mostly promoting music that's big on social media. Can sometimes be the response. But I believe that's like I believe that trend will come, and they're just a little bit later on the mood music trend, because
Mm.
I think the value it adds to people's lives, as we discussed earlier, is like that's agnostic to where you're placed or where
Mm.
you're based. So I think there's a definitely geographic angle to it, and that or geographic/musical, which is interesting. And then the other part, I think, that's more. The first one here was more for like mood music in general, I'd say, and the second one's I guess more for Overtone Studios in specific. That I think we still have a lot of work in kind of bringing our music to new platforms, and not only like the streaming platforms, but making sure that our music can be heard in different places on different types of apps related to fitness or workout or physical environments and things like that. So we were kind of born a company as being just on streaming platforms, but obviously music can be consumed in so many different ways. So we want to bring ourselves or bring our creators and our catalog into different places.
I have a sort of left-centered question before we sort of will close up the interview, and it's been incredibly interesting to talk to you today. A lot of our listeners are founders and sort of innovators in this space, and I often talk with founders that ultimately, oftentimes, has the purpose of being acquired. Now you're running a company that has been acquired. So, what is the financial functional purpose of such a company when you have an owner? Like, what is your responsibility towards your owner? What is it that you need to achieve as a CEO?
Yeah, that's a good question, and actually not a question I don't get that often, actually. So it's interesting. But I mean, first of all, one thing that I think is interesting I want to mention is, but because I mentioned Alex, our founder, who's now heading up our music team. I'm quite, because he did that journey. He was the founder of a company. It got acquired, and that was now almost 4 years ago, I think. And I'm just very happy that he is still so passionate, engaged, and wants to continue on his like initial mission. So I think if you are a founder looking to like get acquired, I would also think a little bit past the acquisition. Like, do you want to get acquired by a company that you believe in their mission as well, and are they complementary, are the synergies, and do you get excited about the people at the company that's acquiring you? Because I think that's been a kind of a success story, and I think we're very happy that Alex still is so passionate about the music and wants to run it. But then me, as kind of coming into as a CEO role there, it's definitely I think it's you get a little bit of best of both worlds in one way, because we run autonomously, but I have a board similar to a regular company. That board is then, since we're owned by Epidemic, is then consisting of people from founders and top management team at Epidemic. So I take kind of guidance from them as a board, similar to a regular company. But I guess the difference is, from a regular company, is that my board is actually also working in the same building. So I don't always need to wait for our quarterly board meetings to get input on something. I can actually, have a bit more closer interaction with the people, the senior people that are kind of my advisors. So I think I really like having that setup where I feel I have trust from the board to run the company in the way me and the team sees fit, but I get support and I get guidance and I get a sounding board from Epidemic Sound team.
But again, back to the very specific question: is it like profitability that feeds into the whole ecosystem, or like what is your purpose then?
Well, there's definitely like obviously in all companies there's a financial component of it. But Overtone Studios is also you could say like complementary to Epidemic Sound for a couple of different reasons. One is that, and this is a lot of the reason why there was an acquisition, because when I was chief of music at Epidemic, we were mostly doing music tailored for sync, to boost in video productions. And then we saw some music is working really well over on the streaming platforms. So we were doing a little bit of that. But we were seeing these other companies that were focusing on doing that were doing it better because they were 100% focusing on it. So then once we acquired Overtone, that kind of enabled Epidemic to focus 100% on doing music for sync. So we could kind of, okay, well, Overtone, you got this stuff covered. Epidemic can focus on this, and that kind of, I think, allowed both companies to be better at what they do. So that's one part of it. Second part of it is, I think, having different rights models as well. So Epidemic Sound being outside of the collecting society world, some creators who are not willing or able to exit their societies are then kind of blocked off from working from Epidemic Sound, which is a shame. But then we have Overtone Studios who has a different rights, or like a regular label model, or label and publishing model, you could say. So we can work with those types of creators. So having, so kind of complementary, both in terms of focus and in terms of rights model, and that allows us to work with more music creators.
I love that description, like, having a separate entity that allows you to focus fully on the pursuit of a different way of running a business, but still being completely aligned with what you actually do. So the model differentiates, the way the rights differentiates, but the overall pursuit of music in that sense is the same. That makes a whole lot of sense. Thank you. That was a great answer, by the way.
Sure.
Niklas, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. I learned a lot from this, and I know that a lot of people who are listening to this will also learn a lot, because it's a space that's not covered that much. And to the points of much of our conversation has also been filled with misunderstandings and misrepresentations, and why that is a different talk, but it has been. So I think it's very important that we get to talk about this in a sober way and really understand what is happening here. And Niklas, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure.
Great. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.